And really excited today because I've got somebody on the line who is, well, I'm a big fan of, given that I've worked within this particular community myself, so I've experienced it firsthand. I'm a big fan of Coen-Gilbert and the B Corporation movement, and that's who I have on online today. Jay is co-founder of B Lab, in fact, who actually it's a non-profit organisation who support the B Corporation movement. And I'm going to get Jay to talk a bit more about that in a little moment. But Jay, thank you so much for being with us today.
It's a total pleasure, Alex. Thanks for having me.
No problem. Jay, as I mentioned, is co-founder of the B Lab. But Jay, what I really wanted to know first and foremost from you is uh, how did you get to this point in your career? Because I know you're an entrepreneur yourself. You've gone through your own career to lead to this particular part of your career. How did it all come about?
Well, hopefully, I'm still just in the middle of the career. It's I would still think of myself as sort of in a work in process, and the same with B Lab, and that's sort of like the inherent in the name is that we're sort of experimental and failing forward in what we do. My background, as you said, is an entrepreneur. And the most important decisions I've ever made as an entrepreneur is to realize that I'm not good enough to do anything by myself. And so both at And One, which was a basketball company that I co-founded in the mid '90s, and then again at B Lab, the nonprofit that I co-founded in the mid 2000s. In both instances, like the core insight was that I'm not good enough to do it on my own, and try to find people with shared vision, but with much more talent than I have. And so far, I've been successful on both occasions about finding people sort of smarter than myself, but with the same drive and vision. In the first case, it was to create a company that we'd be proud of that was competing with Nike and Adidas and Reebok in the basketball, footwear, and apparel industry, and building a brand for ball players. And then transferring some of those experiences to build a brand for change makers, and that are using business as a force for good. And how can we create a brand or a frame around those change makers so that it's easier for folks to identify them and to support them, whether they want to partner with them, invest in them, buy their stuff, go work for them. It's pretty helpful if you can identify them to start, and to identify them and to have that community of companies be worthy of people's support. There's got to be real rigorous and transparent standards that those companies meet in order to be worthy of my support or your support or anybody else's. And so myself and my partners Andrew and Bart, we were all college buddies. We worked together in different ways at And One. And then once we sold that, we're moving on to the next thing. We spent the better part of a couple of years, Alex, talking with entrepreneurs like yourself and investors and other thought leaders and people from academia about what could we do that would be helpful at supporting the existing movement of people that were trying to use their businesses for a higher purpose than just making money. And that making money is great, but it's only a sort of one. It's the necessary fuel, but it's not necessarily the destination. And so we worked with a bunch of entrepreneurs over a couple year period, and out of that created the standards and the legal structure that we could use to distinguish B corporations from traditional companies. And in the several years since we've launched that, there's now about 1,700 certified B corporations in about 50 countries around the world in over 130 different industries that are all united by a shared vision to redefine success in business.
And it's a pretty big deal. That's a really big deal. And I think I heard you describe B corporations as the single most disruptive technology since the steam engine, and the killer app for the 21st century. And
I'm good at hyperbole.
but having said that, though, I mean, it I suppose it goes to the length of actually stating the importance of B corporations. And But what I was interested to know is how did you come to a point of identifying this as a solution, and how did you go
Yeah.
about actually putting that into place?
So good question. So the um, I think one thing that's true for me is I've never had an original idea in my life, and B Corp is no exception. You know, there were plenty of incredible social entrepreneurs that had already identified the need to distinguish whether it's a bag of coffee or a building as being produced with strong social or environmental practices. And all we did was take that insight from LEED or Fair Trade Organic that were identifying individual practices or products that were something we wanted to support, and apply that same thinking to the whole business and just sort of expand the aperture in our lens to look at the whole business. And that wasn't necessarily an insight from me or from either of my co-founders, but it was through talking with hundreds of different entrepreneurs around the U.S. and in other countries around the world that were already leaders in microfinance and fair trade and clean tech and green building, all of whom were pointing to some of the same challenges that they were having, which is they needed outside capital to scale their businesses, but they were afraid when they brought in outside capital that there might be some daylight between the needs of the capital providers and the needs of the company to stay focused on mission as the company scaled. And so we had a challenge there. And then there were others who had pioneered new markets with innovative products and services and innovative practices. And then because there were no standards that were widely recognizable, they attracted a lot of competition from folks who would talk about the same things but wouldn't necessarily be doing them. And so you had this disconnect between companies that were really walking their talk and companies that were just sort of talking a good game. And so they told us that we needed a way, or that they needed a way to help consumers or investors distinguish good companies from just marketing campaigns. And so it was learning for credible standards and the need for a legal structure that enabled those good businesses to scale over time and maintain their mission over time. It was those two insights that led us to create the B Corporation model, which combined those two things into a certification for socially responsible business or high impact businesses.
And again, I'm coming from this from a standpoint of actually knowing a little bit about B Corps, because as I said, I've worked within one. And could you just share, because there's all different types of businesses that are involved with B Corp.
Sure.
Could you share with us some of the particular businesses that you have under the umbrella?
Sure. So in the UK, there could be a food business like Cook Food or Ella's Kitchen or a social enterprise. I think, is it called The Big Issue?
Oh yeah, big issue.
Yeah.
Yes,
You
yes.
know, and so so it can span a more sort of sustainable business with good practices to a social enterprise like The Big Issue, whose core business model in terms of who they hire or what they do is creating a social environmental impact. It could be large, globally known brands like Patagonia, or commercial banks like Triodos Bank, which is an iconic community development bank in Europe. It could be companies like Fairphone or Waka Waka that are doing incredible things to bring mobile technology into emerging markets in sub-Saharan Africa, or the largest worker-owned cooperative in the U.S. called Cooperative Home Care Associates, located in the South Bronx. And so there's a wide range of businesses. Some of them are small, small consultancies, and some of them are large publicly listed companies, and sort of everything in between.
And these are a mixture of businesses that are for profit and not for profit, aren't they, as well?
No, actually, they're all for-profit businesses. And so the one thing that we focused on is that where there's the most confusion in the marketplace, Alex, is amidst all the different companies that are claiming to be green or responsible or sustainable, but with no standards to differentiate those who are just using those words from those who are actually implementing those practices and performing at a very high level. And so all 1,700 certified B corporations in across all those 150 different industries in 50 countries, all of them are for-profit businesses.
Wonderful. And one of the key, I suppose, headlines of B Corp, so that they are better business, or they do
Yeah.
business in a better way. What does that mean to you?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so when we say B Corp is a better way to do business, we mean, three things that are not typically considered when you're thinking about business. One is that they're better for their workers. Um, the second is better for the communities in which they operate. And the third is that they're better for the environment. And so, because B Corps have to meet very rigorous standards of verified social and environmental performance, we measure 40 or 50 different metrics around worker impact, around job growth and the quality of those jobs, around compensation, benefits, worker ownership, democratic workplaces, upward mobility, all those kinds of things. And so we know when we compare the scores of B corporations on the B impact assessment versus the scores of tens of thousands of other businesses that are using that same tool to measure and manage their own performance, we know that B Corps perform better around worker metrics. And that's the reason why we say B Corps are better for workers. Because if you work for a B Corp, you're more likely have ownership opportunities or a profit sharing plan or be paid in the top quartile of your industry. You're likely to have better benefits. You're likely to be getting paid off to volunteer in your community. And all that makes it a better job. Then there's the same type of criteria that we'd use on the environment around energy usage and renewables, or around waste and water and toxic materials. And so all of those questions that we ask of B Corps, we all also ask of those 40-some thousand businesses that are using the B Impact Assessment. And again, we know that B Corps score better in their practices around the environment. And the same thing around community, around diversity, inclusion, supply chain, et cetera. And so on all of those parameters, worker impact, community impact, and environmental impact, we know that B Corps are having a more positive impact across all those different stakeholders. And the best part of all of it is, for many, many businesses, Alex, that also means that they have a better bottom line. And so if you're a better place to work, you're going to attract more talent, and those people are going to stay with you longer. And if you're better for the environment, you're going to be pulling costs out of your cost structure and running more efficiently. And so all of those things make B Corps better creators of long-term financial value as a result of the value they're creating for all of their other stakeholders.
Wonderful. And I saw a statistic somewhere saying that B Corps are 30% more likely to have employees describe themselves as being satisfied and engaged.
Yep.
Do you think that's down to the metrics around people? Why do you think that might be?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And I think the most common reason we hear from CEOs, from large Fortune 500 companies to small startups, the reason why they use the B Impact Assessment or become a B Corp is because it's an incredible employee engagement tool. Like, if you're given a choice to go to a place where you can bring your whole self and not only get a nice paycheck, but also feel connected to a higher purpose, who wouldn't want that? It's sort of have your cake and eat it too. You get to work at a really competitive, terrific business, but you also get to do it with people who share a common interest in using business as a tool to achieve a higher purpose than just making money. And so the people that work at B Corps are attracted to a career of meaning, not just money. And the money and the profit margin becomes fuel for creating a more positive impact in the world. It's not the end in itself. And I think that's one of the things that is one of the reasons why, as you said, employees of B Corps describe themselves as much more engaged and satisfied than employees at ordinary businesses.
And you touched on purpose just a minute ago, and I think for whatever business anybody decides to work for or build themselves, I think finding, or I suppose unlocking your purpose is important to that. And it seems like well, it's a journey for many people. I know it's a journey for me. It's an ongoing journey. How did you go about, I suppose, getting that out of you? How did you manage to sort of identify that this was the route that you wanted to take?
Yeah, I've been pretty lucky in that, both my parents were entrepreneurs, and they both ran their own companies. And so from a very early age, I had the blessing and the curse of having role models who could say, "Hey, I'd like to do that. Let's just go try it and see if it works." And so I always sort of had uh, a sense in my own head that if there was something that I could, that at least it would be worth a try. And so we did that first with a few buddies out of school, and did this with And One, and then had some success with that, and had an opportunity to do that again, and in an even more meaningful way, with buddies, and where we started B Lab. And so obviously the success that we had at And One gave us some of the freedom to take a big swing, to try to be of highest and best use with our limited talents with B Lab. And so we were fortunate in that our first effort to create a business that we'd be proud of was successful enough that we could take another swing, and in this instance, not worry about our own success, but try to create a platform that would enable thousands of entrepreneurs around the world to achieve their own success, in not just a monetary way, but in a way that reflected how they could bring their greatest gifts to work, and how they could use their business to create high quality jobs and improve the quality of life in communities around the world.
Wonderful. And then there's always an issue as well, and I face this. I mean, I've been in recruitment for the last 15 years or so, something like that, and people often struggle with identifying, I suppose, the wheat from the chaff, in the sense that there's certain businesses that have the greenwash and the rhetoric and the marketing that's really clever and
Yep.
really attractive. How can you, other than obviously looking at the B Corp metrics, how do you distinguish from those businesses that is where it's just basically good marketing, essentially?
Sure, and I think that's the core reason why the B Corp certification exists is in order to be a B corporation. It's not that you just sort of say, raise your hand and say, I like, I care for the environment, or I care about people. You go through a very rigorous assessment process, and then they have to be transparent about the answers that they've given on all those questions, and they also have to amend their corporate governing documents to create true legal accountability, that they're considering the impact of their decisions on all stakeholders. So it's really all three of those elements: higher standards of performance, greater public transparency, and a real legal accountability. All of those three things combined help distinguish B corporations in an otherwise very cluttered, confusing marketplace where everybody's sort of using words to describe what they do, but that's not backed up by verified performance metrics.
And again, another big gripe, I suppose, of a lot of people, a lot of job seekers is, they don't like necessarily the way that their employers treated them.
Mhm.
Um, Again, I know you mentioned a couple of things about how B Corps are different, but uh, what could you expect, I suppose, in terms of that whole employer practice that is different
Yeah,
about B Corps?
I think it's interesting. I think one of the biggest things, Alex. I think one of the biggest things about that distinguishes a B Corp is this spirit of, um, their North Star is how can they create the most positive impact. It's not incidental to the business, it's the very purpose of the business. And in addition to that, they also are humble enough to recognize that no business is perfect, and this is a process of continuous improvement. And so the B Corps that are the most inspiring to me are the ones that are proud to have become certified, but recognize that that's just a milestone on a much longer journey. And they engage all of their employees in how they can become better. So it's not something that decides, we're going to do these practices or we're going to be those practices. What the CEO is know that our North Star is having a better impact, a higher impact. But it's up to the team to decide in what way that's going to show up. We can work on together on workplace practices. We can work to be more engaged in our community. We work to have better stewards of our environment. We can be working to take our unique products and services and bring them to new customer groups that might not have access to this type of product or service before. But the best B Corps are the ones that allow the employees, allow their team to determine to choose their own adventure. And so your question about what makes a B Corp a more attractive place to work, what makes it a more engaging or satisfying place to work, I think is not just the North Star of the purpose, but it's the invitation to lead that journey themselves. And the B Corp framework provides like a roadmap and a toolkit, but ultimately it's the employees themselves who decide which path to take, and how hard to run in that direction. So I think it's engaging because it asks the questions, but it leaves it to the team members to determine which direction to go.
I
Does
guess,
that make sense?
yeah, it does. It does. And this, I mean, this question probably because I suppose it sounds like a case by case basis essentially, but guided by the actual the framework that
The
you have.
assessment. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, Another question. I mean, again, another thing that I know a lot of job seekers tend to struggle with is really making a connection with their prospective employer. Um, just based on your experience, not necessarily just relating to B Corps, but do you have any
Yeah.
tips or advice on how somebody might engage you or impress you, whether there's a live job or not?
Yeah. I think that it's human nature. Everybody likes to feel desired and valued. So, the first advice I would give to any job seeker is to only apply to jobs from companies that you'd actually want to work for or work with. And that means that if you found a company that you think is interesting because of their industry or incredibly innovative product or because of the impact they're trying to have on the world, is whether it's in your cover letter or your interview, is tell them what interests you about what they're doing. Because it's like a good first date. A good first rule is to have your date talk about themselves and let them know how interesting they are. And so it'd be the same thing with a potential employer. If what they're doing is to let them know that, and that you'd be thrilled to work with them on such a noble purpose, or to bring such an incredibly innovative product to market. Because most people want to feel good about themselves, and if you can make them feel good about what they're doing, that's usually a way into at least a more receptive, more receptive environment.
Excellent. And again, and if you manage to get beyond that first point of the initial engagement and get to the job interview process,
Yeah,
again, lots of people struggle with interviews. I mean, have you done many interviews yourself, Jay?
yeah, I have a lot. Yeah, yes.
Okay, that's good because my next question is about interviews. So, are there any, I suppose, questions that you would normally ask candidates? I suppose your three most important questions that you might ask somebody.
Yeah, I mean, one would be, why do you want to work here? There's lots of places to work. Why would you want to work at B Lab, or on behalf of the B Corp movement? Because if someone doesn't have a passion for what we're doing, um, this is probably not the right place for them. The second would be, um, what unique experiences have you had, or unique skills do you possess, that you think would help you make a unique contribution to our team. And so I'd like them to talk about themselves, and what in particular they think they can bring to our team. And then the last question I would ask them is, has nothing to do with the job that they're being hired for, but would be, if you could have any job in 5 years' time, what would you like that to be? and it doesn't have to be a B lab, right? It could be anywhere, because if someone can come and make a great contribution with us, our objective is to help them fulfill their career path and help them move on their career path. For some, that may be with us, but for many, it may not be. And so, if their main objective is to be the CEO of a startup technology company, and that's really where they want to be in 5 years' time, there may be still a great opportunity for us to help them get there. Or if somebody wants to be the head of marketing or the head of technology, it's useful to know where they see themselves in 5 years' time, so that we can plan a career path together at And1 that helps them get where they want to go. And so those would be the three questions. So why do you want to work here? What unique skills or experiences can you bring? And where would you like to be in 5 years' time, so I can help you get there?
Wonderful. And just another question actually related to skills, and something I've asked everybody, in fact, that I've interviewed. Are there any, I suppose, skill gaps that you've identified that would perhaps put somebody ahead of somebody else, for example?
hmm I'd say, and this may be a little bit contradictory to what I just said. I think that like the specific technical skills are at least for me, not super high on my priority list of things that I'm hiring for. Obviously, that may vary. If you're looking for a web developer, they need to be able to like write code. But outside of like more specialized functions, we're looking for people that are smart, that are terrific critical thinkers, that are problem solvers, that take initiative, and can work independently, and folks that are good communicators, both written and verbal. And so all of those things are sort of generalist skills, and they can learn any of the technical aspects of our work fairly easily. And I think that's the case in my experience from most applications. And that what we're looking for are people with intellectual curiosity, and a hunger, what we call a drive for mastery. If they've exhibited in other parts of their life or their career an innate drive to master something and an intellectual curiosity, that tells us an awful lot about the type of person that we think will be successful at B Lab. And it would have been the same thing at And1, the same type of person who would have been successful at And1. Because the only thing we know for sure is that whatever we're doing now is not going to resemble what we're doing in 2 years, let alone 5 years. And so, because things are changing all the time and things are so fluid, that we're much more hiring for sort of intellectual curiosity, problem-solving ability, critical thinking, communication skills, and then allowing that person to be able to be flexible in lots of different roles over a 2, 3, 5 year tenure at our organization.
Yeah, there's a definite pattern in the answers that I've been getting, and it's followed a similar thread to what you just said. It's essentially, the softer skills, I suppose, are the ones that are the ones in demand, and like you said, you can learn the technical stuff as you go along.
Yeah, I
That's
think that's
wonderful.
right. Yeah.
And how then, or for yourself, again, I always encourage people to have people to look to in terms of examples of good career paths, or running
Mhm.
businesses in the right way. It sounds like your parents were influential to you.
Yeah.
Are there any, I suppose, non-family related people who are influential to you as well?
Yeah, it's honestly, Alex, it's been mostly the people I've worked with, and so I feel I was very fortunate that my partners at N1 and my partners at B Lab all possess complementary skills from me, and so I've learned a ton from them over the years. Like I'm pretty bad at a lot of things, and so when I can see my partner Bart break a very difficult, complicated problem down into small, digestible parts and make it easier for people at senior, mid, and entry levels of our organization feel like they can understand the problem and they can digest it in a way, like that's an incredibly powerful management skill that I'm fortunate enough I didn't have to go to business school to learn, because I could watch somebody do that in an incredibly powerful way. And when I can watch my partner Andrew be in a very sort of political environment, either with policymakers or with large institutional players, either corporate or capital market players, and just do an incredible job of saying very little, of like laying back and allowing the conversation to happen, and just pick his spots very judiciously, and with incredible insight and with an economy of words, shift a conversation in a more uh, sort of in a better direction, but with a very light touch, and in a way that made people feel heard, and that affirmed where people were, and then just do that with a bit of a with a bit of a question rather than a statement. Like that's so the opposite of me, and like I find that to be incredibly powerful. And so I've been fortunate to work with really talented people, and I learn as much from them as I ever have from a textbook or a classroom or from a book I've read. I find I learn more from experience than in an academic setting, or whether that's in a classroom or in a library reading a book. And so for me, it comes back to picking great partners, that are more talented than yourself, and then emulating the things that they do better than you.
Absolutely, and it sounds like those talented people are really taking B Lab and the big corporations forward. It's gaining, seems to me anyway. I'm a
Yeah,
bit I guess because I have a connection.
yeah.
Know that it's gaining that momentum. What's the future look like for B Lab and B Corp? What's in the pipeline?
Yeah, I think a few things. Like one of the things is that the B Corp movement is becoming more and more global. It's likely that by the end of 2016, or certainly by the middle of 2017, there'll be more B corporations outside of the U.S. Than inside, and that's a fantastic development, because most of the world is outside the U.S. and not inside the U.S. And so the fact that there are entrepreneurs in 50 different countries around the world that are saying, I want to be part of a community of practice that's using business as a force for good. Like that's an incredibly powerful trend that our job is to support. And so our job is to support local leadership with like B Lab UK or the office in Amsterdam working on the continent, or Sistema Bay in Latin America, or as we begin to look into Africa and South and East Asia. The globalization of the B Corp movement is probably one of the biggest trends that we see. And the most important part of that is to distribute the leadership as locally as possible, so that as much of that energy is being carried by local leaders like yourself, and not from some central headquarters that pretends to know things that it doesn't know. So that would be like a big highlight, would be globalization. I'd say the second big highlight would be all of us recognizing that this movement isn't about us. This movement isn't about everybody becoming a B Corp. What this movement is really about is about every company managing their impact with as much rigor as their profits. Because not everybody company wants to become a B Corp, but every company can measure what matters, right? Measure their impact on their workers, their community environment. And we've already got over 40,000 businesses that are using our tools, the impact assessment, as a free educational tool. So that means there's about a 25-to-1 ratio or leverage between the number of certified B Corps and the number of users of the B Impact assessment. Over the next 3 to 5 years, we hope that goes to 100-to-1. So if there's 10,000 B Corps, there'd be 1 million companies using the B Impact assessment as an impact management tool. So the second big trend we see is around giving every company the tools to measure and manage their impact in a fun, easy way, where they can choose their own adventure, but they have a sense of like where they might go. What are some of the attractive paths they might go? So that's like the second big trend we see. And I'd say the third one is around larger institutional players that are now coming to the B Corporation community saying, I'd like to be a part of this. And so that may be a Fortune 50 corporation that says, I'd like to be a B Corp. And if I can't be a B Corp, I'd like to figure out how I could work with more B Corps in my supply chain. And that could be a large multinational like Unilever or Danone, or a large credit provider like Banco Colombia in Medellin. And each of those companies work with tens of thousands of suppliers, and they're looking to have those companies be like B Corps. They don't have to become B Corps, but they want them to behave like B Corps. And the same thing is happening with municipalities, like with city governments around the world, where following on the example of New York City, where we just launched the Best for NYC program, there are now 30 different 30 different cities around the world that want to organize their own Best for Our City campaign, so they can encourage the businesses in their jurisdictions to compete not only to be the best in London, but for London, right? Not only the best in Britain, but the best for Britain. And I think that those three things: globalization, reaching all companies, not just the leaders, and doing so in partnerships with large institutions. I think those are the three big trends that we think we're seeing over the next 5 to 7 years for the B Corp movement.
Wonderful. And talking about trends and also connections and expansion, if people, I mean, there's lots of people around the world be watching this. If they want to connect with or find out more
Yeah,
about the B corporations, where's the best place to look?
sure. There's sort of two places. One is for folks who say, I'd like to understand what the leaders are doing, because I see myself as one. Just go to bcorporation.net. So the letter B and the word corporation all spelled out.net. And that'll be really clear information around the B Corp certification, why other companies are doing it, sort of the business case, as well as sort of the blocking and tackling, the nuts and bolts of the how to go about that process. And then there's a separate website called bimpactassessment.net, and that's for all those other tens of thousands of businesses that aren't really sure if B Corp certification is what they're interested in, but they are inspired to use their business as a force for good to help solve some of our most intractable social and environmental problems. And they can go to bimpactassessment.net and get a free, powerful management tool in the B Impact Assessment that can help give them, that roadmap and toolkit for how they can then join this broader movement to use their business as a force for good. So those would be the two places that folks can look. There's obviously a lot of self-service tools. There's also some pretty good webinar materials where they can hear from some of the leaders, and if they're not able to make one of those webinars, again, all free. They're all recorded and available for people to view on their planes, trains, and hopefully not automobiles. But like when they're in transport and have some downtime and have a chance that they want to hear from some of the other leaders from all around the world, talk about why they're taking those steps and what the experience was like.
Wonderful. Well, Jay, thank you so much for answering the questions. What I'm going to do is leave links to the B Corporation website and the assessment that Jay just talked about as well below. So anybody who is interested and inquisitive, I recommend going to have a look. But Jay, thanks so much for your time and being with us today and
Thank
telling
you.
us about B Corporation.
Thank you. Enjoyed it.